All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're essentially putting on our historical detective hats and investigating a forgotten ancient world that, honestly, completely rewrites human history. We're going to piece together a massive puzzle, one that's been buried beneath ice, dense jungle, and literally thousands of years of time. I mean, think about it. Long before skyscrapers rose over New York, way before the massive pyramids of the Aztecs were even designed, and actually even before the very first pharaoh ever ruled over ancient Egypt, America was already home to civilizations that almost nobody today remembers. Entire sprawling worlds existed here in total silence for thousands of years, and then vanished so completely that a lot of people still think the story of America just kind of started with Christopher Columbus. But as we'll see, buried beneath our deserts and forests and ice, there is evidence of a much, much older history. For literally centuries, the accepted story, the one we all got in our textbooks, was pretty simple. Small scattered groups of primitive hunters just endlessly chasing mammoths across the snow. Sound familiar? Well, modern discoveries are cracking that old narrative wide open. The hidden truth that's emerging now, through ancient footprints, newly found tools, and even submerged ruins, shows that humans actually reached the Americas way, way earlier than we ever thought, and they built some incredibly complex societies. So where did this whole journey actually begin? Well, we have to rewind about 20,000 years, to a time when much of the planet was just crushed under ice. Sea levels dropped so drastically that a giant strip of land popped up connecting Asia and North America. This was Beringia. Now, don't picture a simple, easy bridge you could just casually stroll across. Absolutely not. It was a terrifying, brutal ecosystem. We're talking giant, deadly predators, violent storms, and just endless, pitch-black darkness during the winter. Surviving in a trap like that required a level of resilience that's almost hard to wrap our heads around. Because of that extreme environment, the people who pushed into this frozen frontier were definitely not just primitive wanderers. No way. They were absolute master engineers of their surroundings. You know, they crafted incredibly delicate bone needles just so they could sew highly insulated, weatherproof clothing. They engineered sophisticated weapons out of stone and antler to take down these massive Ice Age beasts, and they successfully tracked those predators across some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. In Beringia, a single mistake literally meant death. Flawless cooperation was the only way your community survived. And actually, this brings us to a genetic twist that still kind of blows scientists' minds today. These ancestors didn't just cross a land bridge, they got stuck on it. Trapped between these towering, impassable ice sheets and just brutal weather, they remained totally isolated in Beringia for thousands of years before they ever moved further south. And that extreme isolation, it actually forged a completely unique genetic population, known today as the ancient Beringians, who adapted to what was undoubtedly one of the harshest environments the world has ever seen. Eventually, though, the ice shifted. As those massive glaciers finally started to retreat, narrow, totally uncharted corridors opened up southward into a landscape no human had ever laid eyes on. They were stepping into a completely alien world. Archaeologists now think this happened in waves. Some of these groups likely used primitive boats to navigate down the jagged Pacific coastlines, while others took the terrifying inland routes, carving a path right through deadly, towering glacial valleys. Right, so this brings us to a literal game changer in American archaeology, a discovery that completely shatters our standard timeline. See, for decades, the absolute gold standard theory was that humans arrived 11,000 years ago, right as the Ice Age was wrapping up. But researchers recently found ancient human footprints buried in dried lake beds down in New Mexico, and they date back 20,000 years. Look at the massive gap between those dates. It means the traditional migration models we've relied on, they totally collapse. I really want us to just pause and sit with that number for a second. 20,000 years. These footprints prove that humans were already living, walking around, and raising families deep inside North America during the absolute peak of the Ice Age. It completely turns the entire story of human migration on this planet upside down. So, when those old textbook assumptions collapse, we're left with some pretty haunting questions, right? Like, who exactly were these people? How did they manage to not just survive, but thrive? And maybe the biggest mystery of all, how many totally lost cultures, entire civilizations, lived and then completely disappeared before written history even kicked off? These are the exact burning questions keeping modern archaeologists awake at night as they dig into the dirt. Just look at the sheer scale of what eventually grew from those early migrations. It's totally staggering.
Take the Amazon and the Mississippi Valley, for example, two entirely distinct regions. In the Amazon, they're now uncovering massive hidden earthworks and road systems that supported literally millions of people. Meanwhile, over in the Mississippi Valley, you've got giant ceremonial mounds that acted as hubs for transcontinental trade. These people were moving copper all the way from the Great Lakes and seashells from distant coasts deep into the mainland. We are talking about incredibly complex connected economic networks.
It's a crazy juxtaposition, really. For the longest time, the standard historical assumption was that the Amazon was just too wild, too hostile to ever support an advanced, large-scale society. But modern archaeology is proving that wrong almost daily. The actual reality, hidden right under all that dense jungle vegetation, is undeniable evidence of enormous, highly engineered settlements. These ancient people weren't just surviving in the wilderness. They were completely terraforming it. But that leads to a massive puzzle. If these sprawling, interconnected worlds were really there, if millions of people were reshaping rainforests and building giant mounds across the continent, why do so many of these monumental civilizations seem basically invisible to us today? How do you just misplace an entire empire?
Well, it wasn't just one single event. It was this tragic, compounding snowball effect. First off, introduced European diseases absolutely devastated indigenous populations, which wiped out not just people, but the oral histories that carried their entire past. Second was the physical destruction. When these sacred cities were abandoned, nature worked fast, swallowing up the roads and earthworks. But the third piece of the puzzle is probably the most frustrating: psychological denial. For generations, early historians flat out refused to believe advanced civilizations could exist in the Americas before Europeans showed up. They literally just ignored or dismissed the hard evidence staring them right in the face.
The good news, the tide is finally turning. And honestly, the clues we're unearthing today are getting incredibly exciting and a little bit mind-bending. Thanks to cutting-edge tech, we're finding submerged ruins off coastal regions, places totally lost to rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. We're finding ancient cave paintings that detail wonderfully complex spiritual systems, and revolutionary DNA analysis. It is constantly throwing curveballs, uncovering migration patterns nobody expected. Every new dig adds another puzzle piece to a story that is clearly still very incomplete. So, as we put this giant puzzle together, we really need to reframe how we see these ancient people. They weren't just migrants passing through. They were, without a doubt, among the greatest survivors in the history of our species. Just imagine it, crossing frozen, totally alien landscapes without modern gear, walking into continents full of giant predators, and keeping your kids alive in temperatures that could kill a person in minutes. They were the absolute pinnacle of human endurance. Because out of those original, incredible survivors came hundreds of distinct nations, languages, and cultures spread across two massive continents. Look at this legacy. The ancestors of America were daring navigators of dangerous, uncharted oceans. They were master engineers who literally redirected rivers. They were agricultural geniuses who cultivated revolutionary crops. And they were brilliant astronomers and storytellers. They fundamentally shaped two entire continents thousands of years before the rest of the globe even knew they were there. Which ultimately leads us to this one absolutely powerful realization. The real story of America did not begin with colonization. It did not start with a European explorer planting a flag. It started thousands of years earlier, forged in the ice, in the darkness, through unmatched survival skills and just sheer human courage. For way too long, that true story has been buried under myth, politics, and historical bias. But finally, the truth is fighting its way to the surface. Right now, scientists are out there searching caves, deserts, jungles, and the ocean floor. And somewhere, hidden beneath the soil of our modern world, the footprints of our very first ancestors are still waiting. So I'll leave you with this thought. If we completely miss 20,000 years of advanced civilization, what other undiscovered secrets are still buried right beneath our feet? What chapters of human history are just waiting to be uncovered? Thanks for joining me on this historical deep dive today, guys. Keep asking those big questions and always keep looking beneath the surface.